So I'm Sarah Armstrong-Smith, Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft. So what's one of those? My role, in essence, is to liaise with Microsoft's largest enterprise customers. So CIOs, CISOs, CTOs. I work multi-sector and multi-country, particularly across EMEA. And I'm going to be really reflecting on the evolving threat landscape in particular, talking around some of the announcements that we made at Ignite in November, and then kind of reflecting on what does the future look like and where do we kind of go from here, in essence. And I really kind of think about, just to kind of start things off, cybersecurity has really become one of the most defining challenges of our time. It's really quite humbling, I think, even in the last 2 years, when we think we're nearly at the second year of the anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've now got another war in Israel. And on top of that, the attackers have been absolutely relentless. There really is no stopping them in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it. I don't think you could really go a single day without hearing about some kind of breach or some kind of huge attack. And that even includes Microsoft itself as well. So we are one of the most attacked entities in the world. So if they're not attacking Microsoft, they're trying to attack our customers, in essence. So kind of what is driving some of this change? Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, and I'm sorry, you're either in two camps. You're in the, tell me more about AI, or you're in the second camp, which, for the love of God, please stop talking about AI. But I'm really sorry, but AI is really key to a lot of what we're talking about and where we're kind of going into that future. But really, the speed and sophistication and scale of attacks is really kind of taking it to the next level. And I've mentioned already about these regional tensions and how that's having a huge impact in what we're seeing and how things are evolving. Now, again, to put that into perspective, we're not just talking about cyber attacks, we're also talking about cyber influence operations. So when you think about how much of the world is about to go through some kind of election process, referendums, the cyber attacks, especially nation-sponsored actors, are really kind of looking at, how do I do electoral tampering, disinformation, propaganda. They are flooding social media in particular. So not only are we talking about cybersecurity from an IT perspective, we're also looking at it from a data perspective, an information flow as well. Now, depending on what stats you believe and what you kind of think about, now cybercrime is an $8 trillion business. So if it was a country, it would be the third biggest country in the world, only behind US and China. It would also be the fastest growing economy in the world, overtaking India in particular. So when they say crime doesn't pay, it really does if you're in cybercrime. And there's a real mix here in terms of organized crime in particular. That probably wouldn't surprise you. But we've seen a huge increase in access brokers, cybercrime as a service, subscription services that you can buy off the dark web. And for about $50 to $100 a month, you can buy a self-contained phishing kit. It's got all the fake domains, all the emails, all the addresses ready to go. All you have to do is send them out. There's even money laundering as a service now. So all of that proceeds of crime that you're making, what do I do with it? I still need to launder it. I still need to get that cash out. So that's why that number in particular is so big. If I do a little reflection on the times from Microsoft, and I'm going to talk a little bit about passwords and identity-based attacks, and we always say identity is core to everything. Now, if I reflect back in 2022, we were blocking about 3 billion password sprays a month. That is peaking at 30 billion. So there is a reason why we keep telling people, please do not use the same passwords. Please use MFA, and please kind of do all of these things. And this is why it is so easy for attackers to be able to get access to services. Now, the other thing is regards to the number of threat actors that we are actively tracking. So we are tracking large-scale nation-sponsored actors as well as ransomware operators. Now, it used to be that we used to name those threat actors on elements on the periodic table. So nobelium, iridium, phosphorus, various different threat actors. But what we found is we were actually running out of elements. So last year, we went through a taxonomy change, and that's really down to the number of threat actors. So we now name a lot of the large-scale threat actors after weather fronts, in essence. Very strange. So Russia, in essence, is blizzard. Typhoon is China. Sandstorm is Iran. Then we have storm. And that normally comes with 4 letters. So when we have storm, it's a new threat actor, a threat actor that we cannot 100% attribute, or it's a new campaign. And this is a real sign of the times when we're seeing new threat actors and new large-scale threat actors who are able to dominate their market very, very quickly without very limited effort. So it wouldn't surprise you if we come back a year from now, that number is at 400 or above. So let me just kind of talk a little bit. I'm not expecting you to read all of this, but here's some insights from our digital defense report. So every year, we have our flagship report, and it's a reflection on what happened the year before. The actual report itself is about 120 pages. It's really quite meaty. And this is just kind of the top 10, if you like. Now, kind of really, really important is number 1 for a reason. As much as we're talking about cool technology, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, really is security foundations really do make the difference. And I don't like to call it basic hygiene. Basic assumes it's easy. And we know for a lot of companies, this is not easy. But I just talk about some of those foundations. And Microsoft will probably die on our sword when we tell you about how important multi-factor authentication is. So MFA, principle of least privilege, patch your systems. Can't tell you how many times we keep saying that. But also when we're thinking about anti-malware and how we're protecting the data. So those foundations, no matter who you are, the size of your company, whatever sector that you're talking about. Now, everything kind of leads from that, in essence. So it's in a 200% increase in ransomware, human-operated ransomware in particular. Now, there's a few interesting things in here. The vast majority of targets, so 80 to 90% of all of those targets are actually SMEs. So what we see in the media, these big, large enterprises, they are not normally the target. The SMEs are the targets because they're more likely to pay, they don't have the same capability, and the average ransomware in Europe is about 300,000 euros. The good news, if there is some good news, if you do number 1, and you have good foundations, the success rate for ransomware drops to 2%. So that means that first of all, they've got to get access, they've got to laterally move, they've got to exfiltrate, they've got to encrypt, they've got to do all of those things. But you have those good security foundations, then the ability, as I say, to get that success rate drops considerably. Now, I've already talked about password attacks are skyrocketing. And for a lot of the threat actors, they favor the tried and tested. So you think about that return on investment. You think about those access brokers that I was talking about in particular. And so their job, in essence, is to get that initial access, get those credentials and sell them on. Now, those credentials are also stack ranked. So if I just happen to get a random person in Microsoft, for example. Now it's Microsoft, so maybe it'll go up a little bit, but the average price goes for less than $1. And if we're going up to an admin level, I need to guarantee that this person has that privileged access that I desperately need. It might go $100 or even higher, depending on what it is and the kind of success rate. But as I say, it's the speed in which they get in, get out, but also the speed that once that threat actor, particularly a ransomware operator, has got access to that credential, they're going to use it very, very quickly. So the kind of the fourth one is business email compromise is the most financially impacting cybercrime of all. So you might think that's ransomware. I sort of said that success rate really is quite low. And so that's hence why they're going to the SMEs. We're tracking 156,000 attempts a day. So business email compromise, second stage attack, they're already in your email. And this is where they're taking their time. They can almost kind of relax a little bit, understanding your relationship, your supply chain, but also understanding your mannerisms as well. How do you even write an email? Are you a Bob? Are you a Robert? Do you kind of bark orders? Are you quite nice about it? But also an interesting thing, we've seen a huge increase in internal phishing attacks. So you can imagine external phishing. You've got lots of email filters and various things going on. So even for Microsoft, 25% of all emails don't even reach the inbox because we've already filtered them out. That being said, you've got lots of different things. This is an external user. You don't normally get an email from this person. Now, if you imagine I'm already in your organization, I'm impersonating someone in seniority, even the CEO, and I blat out an email to everyone in the organization. Maybe, it's a great work that you've been doing, guys. Here's a bonus. Open this attachment to find out what it is, or go and log in to your HR site for more information. And all of a sudden, malware is being released, or they've collected some credentials. And so that's a really important thing for them to realize, that they are bypassing how we train people, our controls, finding different ways in. And that's why business email compromise is at that all-time high in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it. Now, nation-sponsored actors in particular, as I've kind of mentioned, are going off the scale. So it used to be all about espionage and stealth. A lot of the threat actors, particularly the big four, when we talk about Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea, some of them don't care. They just don't care that you know who they are and what they're doing and how they're doing it, because it's a show of strength, in essence. Now, probably wouldn't surprise you that the most attacked country is the USA. UK normally comes into the top 3, but in the last year in particular, it's USA, Ukraine, and Israel. So again, probably wouldn't surprise you when you think about that kind of geopolitical tension and what's kind of going on there. But they're kind of moving, as we sort of said, from disruption to destruction. We've seen a huge increase in wiper malware, destructive malware, and the willingness to use it as well in particular. And that's why kind of number 7, IoT and OT, is really increasing. And the real challenge, if you like, and kind of the conversations that I'm having a lot, is when you think about the threat actors, they really understand IT operating systems. They probably really understand Windows very, very well. They understand how to get access. They understand the vulnerabilities to know what to exploit, particularly if you're not patching your systems. It's that easy. I run a scan, look what's exposed, and happy days, I'm in. But really the challenging thing is when you think about industrial control systems, some of those bespoke operational technologies, they don't really know what they are or what to do with it. And the danger is they just start turning things up and down, don't really know. And at some point, the worry is that they are going to cause an industrial accident of such magnitude that we potentially will have some fatalities. And we'll be really going to be asking some really pertinent questions with regards to how did we get here? How are we not protecting the OT? And the IoT as well, particularly smart technologies, IoT devices are outstripping IT devices 3 to 1 in terms of how many of those are coming online every minute. And so our focus has to be much, much wider into these areas. Now I'm going to talk about AI. I told you can't avoid AI in particular. I'm going to reflect on some of those things, but the real need on that collaboration is really key about sharing information, public and private sector. What can we do? And I'm going to touch a little bit into the future of cybersecurity and the professionals and the people. So we kind of think about where we are and how we're reflecting. I think it's fair to say we always feel like we're on the back foot. The attackers always have the advantage. They don't have regulations. They don't have policies. They don't have to go through umpteen layers of management to get sign off. They just do what they want. And they have this ever expanding attack surface. We're really kind of seeing not just the scale of threat actors, but also how those threat actors are acting in collaboration with each other as well. And we kind of have these fragmented tools as well. And I think over the years, when we kind of think about many companies that kind of invested in best of breed, different technologies to do different things, so much investment has been made in all of these areas. But you just kind of think about as a typical security operations, typical analysts, they might have to go in and out of multiple different tools to maybe get access to a lot of these services, lots of alerts that are coming in. Are those services integrated or not? So we kind of then thinking about a typical attack flow, particularly as we've sort of said, maybe ransomware or some of the things that we're doing. Now, dependent on how they got access in, so it may have started in email, we've got malware going on to an endpoint, we've got command and control servers going on outside of the organization, identities are being compromised, and then they kind of have to do something. So what are they trying to laterally move into the cloud, trying to exfiltrate data, trying to do all of these things. Now, as we sort of said, there's a myriad of different tools that are kind of coming into play here, dependent on your organization and dependent on what you've deployed at different points. And we're kind of reliant, if you like, on a lot of these tools that are actually talking to each other. Sometimes we've got duplication. Sometimes we've got lots of gaps in coverage because we just kind of assume that we've got the right information, we've got the right logs, and we're able to act at speed and at scale. So I'm just going to talk a little bit, as I said, about one of those announcements that we made at Ignite in November in particular, and how we're kind of seeing the world, if you like. So one of the things that we're talking about in particular is the XDR, that extended detection and response, the SIEM and AI integration. Now, we love changing names. I'm really sorry, Microsoft can't help it. As soon as we kind of have a name, we change the name, and then we have to change all our PowerPoint slides, and we have to change all our marketing. It's really fun. And so Microsoft 365 Defender, kind of you think about the name, it's Microsoft 365. And so we've actually just changed it to Defender XDR. So in essence, what it's basically doing is all of the different defenders together. So you've got cloud, all of that is kind of under one central platform. And the idea, if you like, where we're kind of moving to is kind of that utopian view of a lot of security analysts, security operations, just one pane of glass. We're not quite there yet, but that's kind of where we're going to. And if you're familiar with a lot of the Microsoft technology, you can kind of flip between Defender and Sentinel. We had multiple different Defender portals for different things. But in essence, that's kind of where we're going, that one place, one perspective, irrespective of where that attack's coming from. Now, this is a little bit of a messy slide. It doesn't kind of look great when I kind of explore it out. But in essence, you still have Sentinel. So Sentinel is still in Azure. It's still its own portal, still all of those things. But in essence, I'm taking Sentinel and I'm putting that view into Defender. That is the key, so you don't have to flip in and out. So in essence, you can manage an incident, you can do all the things that you need to do from within the Defender platform. And I think over time, this may go, no promises, I know Microsoft, but this is kind of, let's just say, this is kind of where we're going to. But at the moment, it's being able to integrate the Sentinel view into Defender in particular. Now, a lot of this is then thinking about how we're putting a lot of that intelligence to work and what are we kind of doing about it and kind of how all these things are integrating together. Now, I mentioned about the scope and scale of some of the attackers and kind of like where are we, what are we kind of thinking about? So we have 65 trillion telemetry signals that we get every single day. So that's off the cloud. When we talk about the cloud, it's M365, it's Azure, it's Dynamics. But it's Bing, it's LinkedIn, it's GitHub, Xbox. It's kind of every single thing that Microsoft has, to every authentication request, every email. No matter what you're doing, we get a telemetry signal. And how do we make sense of all of that? So we've got 10,000 people working in various different roles. We've got engineers, data analysts, we've got threat experts, we've got hunters, And all of these people, in essence, are, as I say, trying to make sense. What's new, what's different, how those 300 threat actors are evolving in particular. And it kind of combines itself into all of these different areas from every single angle. So we've talked about the threat protection, it's the information protection, it's the identity protection, security operations. So in essence, all of those different technologies, no matter what technology, excuse me, you've deployed, is really key that we kind of have that visibility. It's to kind of have that end-to-end protection in essence. So it's irrespective of what technology, irrespective if it's Microsoft or not. So we've got the multi-cloud capabilities and multi-platform as well. So it's not just a Microsoft operating system, it's Mac, it's Linux, it's all of that combined. Now you may be kind of familiar with some of these product sets. I've already talked about Microsoft Sentinel and Defender from a threat protection perspective. On the data security, we have Purview. On the privacy, it's Priva, and then identity and Intune at the bottom in particular. Now I talked about how we're integrating the SIEM, the XDR, and the AI. So let me go there. So that end-to-end protection that I was just talking about, those 65 trillion signals, what if we then put the Gen AI over the top of that as well? How is that going to become a game changer for security operations? So let me explain why we think this is actually going to tip the balance the other way. So you may be familiar with OpenAI and Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI. OpenAI is not Microsoft, so just to kind of put that there, OpenAI is a completely different company. So Microsoft has invested over $10 billion into that company. Microsoft also built the supercomputer that runs the OpenAI platform. And so you're thinking about the large language models that's running ChatGPT and some of that capability. So in essence, we've taken those models and moved it into a Microsoft environment. And so when we could then able to take those large language models, the 65 trillion signals, we're able then to kind of hyperscale all of that view and introduce Security Copilot in particular. Now, the idea behind it, and really when we're thinking about from an analyst perspective, how long does it take for you to train an analyst? How long does it take for that analyst to become an active threat hunter? And a lot of the analysts also have to understand the technology, they have to understand the evolving landscape, and they kind of have to know what it is they're looking for in a roundabout way. So you might have complex queries, you might have various different things. So we think about ChatGPT and we think about some of those technologies. The idea is you just ask the question you want to know in plain English, and you get a plain English answer back. Now, this is very, very new technology. We're in an early access program with a select number of different companies across different sectors. We also have IT service providers involved in that as well. But early days are very, very promising with regards to the kind of the feedback that we're getting. And if I just kind of look at the graph in particular, the amount of time saved on core SOC tasks. And I think that the 84% on troubleshooting minor issues, preparing reports, threat intelligence assessments, threat hunting, and that active investigation and response. So even Microsoft's own SOC, our Cyber Defense Operations Center, has also been trialing this as well. And so one of the things that they said is a huge game changer. So when you think about that 65 trillion signals, so if I convert that into how much data is that, that's about 500 petabytes of data. About 10 petabytes of that goes into our SOC. Now you can imagine 10 petabytes of data that I then have to look at the logs, I have to filter that, I have to kind of look at all of that. How much time and effort, how much machine learning, how much automation do I need? And when we've got these really novel attacks that are coming from a threat hunting perspective, where do I need to kind of invest that difference? So one of the things that has worked tremendously is reverse engineering of malware, in particular new code that may have been injected into our operating systems or various different platforms. So they're able to take that line of code, feed it into Security Copilot. What is it? What does it do? When was it added? And that is really changing a lot of kind of what we're doing, what we're seeing in that particular area. Now, this is a kind of, again, it's a little bit of a slide. It doesn't kind of, when I project it up, doesn't quite work very well. But in essence, this is really taking all of that information together, the XDR, the SIEM, the AI in particular, and it's really utilizing a lot of the information that we have in terms of initial detection. Where's that kind of coming from? Now, this is important when we talk about, this is in SAP. So when we're thinking about business email compromise and you're thinking about someone is impersonating someone in accounts, they're trying to get an invoice to be paid, and there's a correlate. How do you correlate something that's going on with an application versus something else that's going on in the IT environment? And how do I stop that transaction, or how do I correlate with the fact that this started with a phishing email several weeks or several months ago? So it's that correlation of signals and where they're coming from across all of those different technologies. It's being able to classify the type of attack and identify the type of actor, what they're doing, how they're doing it, what assets that the threat actor has been able to control through that privileged access, if they changed access. And it's really about stopping and isolating, using automation as quickly and effectively as possible. So we're not relying on having to do an alert and that going into a SOC analyst and then triaging that and then realizing that someone's in SAP, they're trying to exfiltrate data or trying to get money out of the organization. So this attack disruption is kind of really key across all of that. And that's really utilizing that kind of AI, the machine learning that kind of comes with it. And really the objective, therefore, is quite a bold statement that even Microsoft, our own CISO, has made publicly at Ignite. In essence, what he said, I am going to eliminate all tier 1 SOC analysts. So just to put that into perspective, this is not I am going to sack them, make them redundant. No, in essence, I do not need a tier 1 analyst going forward. This is the kind of the idea, that kind of the get an incident, triage it, move it on over and over and over and over. The level of fatigue that kind of goes into that. The speed of those actors and how they're able to get in, get out in less than 15 minutes. Well, I think a lot of analysts, SLAs are probably 15 minutes. So by the time you've got an incident and triaged it and moved it on or closed it, they're already in and out. And so in essence, those tier 1 analysts become tier 2 become tier 3. And we suddenly have a huge team that are able to do active threat hunting. Microsoft even has a new team that we have stood up called GHOST. And I got to get the acronym right because we love our acronyms. So this is Global Hunting Oversight of Threat Hunting, something like that. So in essence, all the threat hunters are going across every single Microsoft environment. So that's either public cloud, it's our corporate environment, it's all of those things. But this team, in essence, is elevated up. So we've took them out of our standard incident response functionality and moved them into active, proactive mode based on all the things that we know, all the things that we've blocked, all the indicators of compromise. We are going full mode out for all those threat hunters. And I think that in essence is the game change. The same people, they just have a different outlook and a different perspective. So in essence, this is really about, therefore, driving that better defense all in. So that visibility, no matter what technology, this is not about you changing all your technology, by the way. I know people have kittens when they're thinking about, oh, I've got to get rid of all my technology stack, got to move it into Microsoft. No, you don't. So the beauty is this is about integration. If you've got some very niche, very specialist technologies, it's about how do we integrate, how do we get that visibility across all of that. The deeper insights based on the threat intelligence that we have, based on those threat actors, based on those novel techniques that they're doing, detecting, but also greater safety. When I'm talking about critical infrastructure and how we're going to stop those threat actors in particular infiltrating the OT, causing those industrial accidents. This is kind of where we're moving to. And in essence, it's really about tipping the scale the other way. Because there's one thing that the threat actors do not have. They do not have the scale of data that we have. And I want to say we, and I'm saying collective we, between all of us. They do not have the level of threat intelligence that we have. They do not have the level of collaboration. They might think they do with the threat actors, but when we're talking about public-private sector collaboration across countries, as well as those threat intelligence agencies, and putting that to work as well. It's really about this. We really do feel like we're moving from this asymmetric perspective of where we are today, where we're kind of like this with each other, and we're going to tip it the other way. So that, in essence, if I kind of then show you, this is exactly the same slide as what I showed you before, with the kind of the Sentinel, Defender, Purview, all the products, but Copilot is right in the middle. So that security access program I was telling you about is kind of in this area, Sentinel and Defender at the moment, but it's going everywhere. So the same level of capability, that same ask me a question, get a straight answer back, is going to be in Purview. So that's your data security. Tell me where my data is exposed. That's your privacy. And then we're going into identity as well at the same point. Now, to kind of round out, I'm hoping we've got time for some questions, but where do we go from here and what do we expect next? Well, I've kind of talked a little bit already from that disruption to destruction. The battleground is in that critical infrastructure. Now, this is still early days about attackers being able to harness the power of AI. We've already seen some instances where people are going, but the threat actors are writing phishing emails and they're writing malware. The kind of thing of the AI is not doing that. The human behind it is doing that. So I think this is really, so they're kind of utilizing the power, but they haven't really harnessed it to the degree and scale of what we think they might be able to do when they kind of have built their own large language models or they steal them. In essence, we know there are some big threat actors that rather than why would I waste my time building something the size of OpenAI on a supercomputer when I can just steal it. I wait for you to train it, I'll wait for you to do all the hard work, then I'll take it for myself. But as we sort of said, as technology evolves and the speed in which we can block those attacks, they have to keep evolving as well. So social engineering and how we protect people in particular is really, really important. Because again, why would I waste my time trying to get into your network, trying to laterally move when you keep blocking me, keep doing all these things? I'll go directly to source. And so if I can get the human to do it, I can manipulate the human, I can get them to sabotage, I just pay them enough money. And in the current climate, why not? So we know Lapsus, the English teenagers, they were willing to pay upwards of $15,000 to get access to credentials. Now, it's a lot of money for a lot of people, and you're going to think of the $8 trillion that people, those threat actors have accumulated. I just add a bit more money. Someone somewhere is going to do what I want you to do. And that cyber influence operation is really important as well. So what does this mean for us? So it's about how we scale and deploy quicker and quicker. And I'm going to kind of talk about that a little bit more. But I say identity, as I started with, identity is core to everything that we're talking about. That initial access in and the exit out means that data security, what are those threat actors after, becomes even more critical with what they're trying to do and how they're doing it. I've mentioned about public and private sector, but also promoting digital literacy, particularly when we're talking about that cyber influence operations or how those threat actors are trying to socially engineer people. So I also want to round out, and I'm going to talk a little bit on this code and configs, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm going to show you a very busy slide, but you can get a copy of all these slides afterwards, so you can have a little bit of a deeper dive. So in November last year, we talked about our Microsoft Secure Future initiative, and this is about game-changing, breaking everything, if you like. So not just the technology that we deploy, it's how we fundamentally build our operating systems, how we manage, everything. And again, it's reflecting on some of those threat actors that are after Microsoft in particular. So again, apologies, this is a busy slide. I'm going to talk you through some of the key elements. So the first one is about software development, the core of the operating system, in essence, about how the security by design, by default. And the key thing here is we're moving our coding language over to Rust. But we've also contributed over 10 million investment into the Rust development tool and the Rust Foundation in particular. So this is a new coding, new foundations of that coding in particular. This one at the bottom, as much as we talk about the cloud and moving to the cloud, and the cloud is this utopia facility, and you get the shared services and all of the things, the reality is most customers run hybrid. So they got an on-premise, they're not going to get off on-prem very quickly. Some customers still running mainframes. And they said, look, we're going to be like this for years. We may not ever change. We may run both environments. And so in essence, we have to then work out, how do we protect the on-prem? How do we get patching out as quickly as possible? Can we automate that patching so that patching doesn't become a bane of people's lives? So we're kind of thinking about, how do we automate that patching on an on-prem environment? So obviously in the cloud, a lot of the infrastructure is already patched by Microsoft. So go to the middle bit on identity. Now, as I sort of said, a lot of this is reflecting on threat actors. Now, I mentioned about Storm. Storm is a threat actor that we ever have not 100% attributed, or it's a new campaign. Now, you may remember Storm 0558. Now, this is a Chinese threat actor that managed to get access into Microsoft's environment. They were able to forge tokens that gave them access into a customer's environment. We are completely redesigning, re-architecting our identity framework, our approach to identity in particular. And so a rapid rotation of keys, but also machine-to-machine authentication as well, in terms of how we're doing that, moving a lot of the identity capability into confidential compute as well, in terms of a level of encryption that all goes around the identity capability. Kind of the third layer, if you like, is really about how quickly we can get those updates out. So believe it or not, industry standard, so if we're running bug bounties, or it's something Microsoft's identified, a third party may have identified a vulnerability in any part of our infrastructure, the industry standard to get that, reverse engineer it, build an update, deploy update, test it, blah, blah, is about 90 days. So we're committing to reduce that by 50%. And so that's really incumbent on Microsoft in particular to speed up our engineering and deployment of patching updates, etc. The third bit, the final bit, if you like, is really regards to the fact that if someone does identify a vulnerability, we need you to tell Microsoft and not the threat actor. In particular, we already run quite a transparent process. So the only kind of thing, if you're a researcher or a company or whoever, if you identify a vulnerability, you come to Microsoft and say, we have big bug bounty programs, you're hopefully going to make some money, but please don't go public until we've got that patch out, until we've been able to get it, because otherwise it's in the wild, the threat actors are taking advantage of it. It's really important that we allow that level of transparency, that we allow those researchers to have their own kudos, in essence. Look, I found a vulnerability in Microsoft operating system or Azure or whatever the case may be, but I took it to Microsoft and they gave me money. And that's really important, that we do not stop people from doing that. We don't try and zip them up or refrain them from talking about it. So this is a busy slide, but I wanted to just kind of get some of those kind of key principles out there. So that you can kind of see, you're going to hear so much more on this. As I sort of said, at the moment, identity is the core. There are multiple defaults coming out of the box, and the first stuff that's coming out of the box is MFA being turned on by default. Now, you can change it, you can change those parameters, you can kind of do those things, but in essence, you are going to get lots of more things coming out of the box by standard, straight from Microsoft. So it's not dependent on you trying to figure out what policy, how far low do I put this thing. It's already there at a baseline level. Thank you, everybody.